I'm Gary MALER. I graduated with a Master's of Architecture degree with an emphasis in urban design in 1974. I grew up in the little town of Brookshire, Texas, just west of Houston. Tiny little place. My graduating class in high school was 22 kids, 22. All but 6 of those went on to college, believe it or not. Yeah, it was a pretty shielded, wonderful little life, really close to my grandparents and extended family, aunts, uncles, great aunts, uncles. Lots of people don't get to do that these days. They're scattered all over the country. So it was a bucolic, wonderful little existence, really. I was poor, but we didn't know it. We were happy. I think Ed Romanick put it the best. When I came here, I started talking to him about that. He said, "You've discovered capitalism." And I had indeed. When I got out of undergraduate school, I had a 5-year professional degree. So I had many of the classes here. They offered a Bachelor of Environmental Design, and you had to go on to a master's degree to get what I had an equivalent of my 5-year undergraduate degree. So when I came to A&M, with Ed Romanick's help and others here at the college, I was able to sprinkle in a lot more business classes, which is what I needed, an understanding of finance and markets and that sort of thing. And so really my degree, when I came through here, my Master of Architecture degree was probably the precursor to the Masters of not urban planning, but the Master of Land Development program, because that's what I wanted to be as a developer. And so I was working actually part-time with a developer, and really got the bug for capitalism, as Mr. Romanick said. I would say that architecture, any of the design fields, are probably one of the greatest areas for you to prepare for leadership, because it's recognizing patterns, it's creativity. And for me, the junction of my bent towards strategy and creativity gives me a powerful set of talents for what I do every day. I see patterns that other people don't even think about, and architecture helped me to do that. And that really has helped me tremendously. I started working, as I said, while I was going to graduate school with a developer, because when I got out of undergraduate school, that was in the 70s, and there were jobs in architecture were few and far between. Literally, people were working for free to get their 5-year, literally. I knew guys that were literally working for nothing in an architect shop to get their apprenticeship down. I got married fairly early and had a kid. You can't do that. And so I had to work. So I kind of got the development bug. And from there, I came on to graduate school. Then I went to work with an Exxon subsidiary, Friendswood Development Company. Wow, working for Exxon was like going to school and getting paid for it, because they put a guy like me who studied architecture and design in mortgage banking or in market analysis. And that's how they build leadership. You'd go every 3 to 6 months, you'd be transferred to another department. So by the time you got to where you were someone who they would consider for a top level position, you'd seen everything in the company. It was an amazing job, great company, highly ethical. I learned so much there. And that prepared me for everything that came after that, I think. Exxon was a tremendous experience. It really was. And that led me then, at one point my wife and I were brushing our teeth at the double vanity, and I was on the fast track to management and enjoying it, loved my job, but I was missing something. I was leaving at 4 o'clock in the morning, getting home at 9 at night, and she said, "Is it really worth it for you to make $500,000 a year and never see your girls?" And I said, "No." And so I came back to A&M to talk to my favorite finance professor, Wayne Etter, and he said, "Why don't you go talk to Pappy Wooten at the Real Estate Center?" And I did. Unbeknownst to me, Pappy and the vice president of Friendswood Development Company were really close friends. And I told him I was thinking about making a move. I didn't know he was going to call him that day. He called him that day, and I hadn't even told him I was looking for a job. He hired me on the spot. I'm glad he did, because I probably wouldn't have had one, because I was looking, without them even knowing it. But Pappy hired me, and the rest is history. I've been at the center ever since. Well, first I'd have to say my grandfather, because he was such a tremendous man. He was my idol. He was. He could do anything with his hands. He could build anything. Quite an entrepreneur. During the Great Depression, he bought land. I still have a piece of land that he bought in 1933. He bought it from a guy that went bankrupt. And so Grandpa Trittin, my mother's side of the family, was my hero. And I learned to build and do all kinds of things from him. My dad was that way too. My dad was one of the hardest working, most honest men I ever knew. And both of them were adamant about the fact that I could learn something from the lowest man on the totem pole. When I worked with my dad, he said, you can learn something from that laborer right there. And he was right, I did. And I learned empathy from them, learning how to relate to people, even people way different from me. I learned how to do that, and that's helped me tremendously. It really has. Then my greatest, I guess in terms of true leadership, was Dan Stauffer at Friendswood Development Company. I kind of comically say sometimes that Dan was the guy that we would climb a greased flagpole for. He was such a great man that you would do anything for him. I was going to bring it today, but I didn't think about it since I came in early, but I have a note on my desk in a little box covered with glass so it stays in good shape that Dan wrote me. One of my first big reports that I put together, for a market report that I put together for the company. And he sent me a great note saying, this is well done. You've taken a complex set of data and presented it in a very simplistic way so that everyone can understand it. I didn't know at the time, but I was to give a presentation just a few days later to the entire board of the company. And so I'm across the room from Dan, and I'm sweating bullets. I mean, this is a big deal. You know, I'm the young new guy there, and I'm giving a report to the top management of the company. It's a great opportunity, obviously. And I knew that, but you feel the pressure when you're under that sort of thing. The butterflies are in your stomach, they are. Dan could sense that. And being the great leader he was, he came across the room and he said, hey, you've got this. Didn't I hire you? I said, yeah, you did, Dan. He said, you're the brightest guy I've ever hired. You've got this, now go do it. And I did, I just nailed it. I'll never forget that guy. He was amazing, great leader, great man. Yeah, I came in, it was funny. I worked in oil patch and made a bunch of money to work my way through school. So I had bought a Corvette when I was young and foolish. And so when I came to A&M and went to work for Pappy Wooten, he basically told us go do good things. And I joked with Pappy, I said, Pappy, that's like putting a Corvette on a dirt road, telling me to go do good things, because I came out of a structured corporate environment where everything's pretty much laid out. I learned from Pappy that you just got to pull it up and go grab it and do what you can, figure out it on your own and go do what you can with what you've got. And so I developed a series of programs for the Real Estate Center on residential real estate development. That's where I started, basically in the education division. Well, along the way, he and his associate director, Rick Floyd, who became the director, saw some promise in me, and Rick named me associate director. And I remained associate director for a number of years. They brought in another guy after Rick retired, or actually didn't retire, but he went over to join the larger university as a assistant vice president. And I was doing a lot of special studies for the university at the time. I helped put together a real estate land management plan for the university. They didn't even know what they owned. And I went to courthouses and everywhere and looked for what they owned and put together a decision tree and everything else, a decision matrix for the university. So I was doing all those sorts of things. And then when Rick left, they brought in Malcolm Richards. When Rick retired, when Malcolm retired and went overseas, they tapped me to become the director of the center, and I've been doing that now 13 years. So that's just progression slowly over the years, kept getting more and more responsibility, and I guess they saw something good in me, and I certainly responded to that challenge. Well, your anatomy tells you one thing about communication. You've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. So leadership and communication means that you listen a lot. You learn from other people. You listen to what they have to say. I had a professor, going back to the Corvette thing, I traveled across the country, kind of did my Route 66 thing, and as I worked through summer school, I would go to summer schools in different states even. And I was up in Indiana doing a big project up there and going to school at the same time. And I learned from a professor there, a psychology professor. He said, the key to success is communication, and the key to communication is breaking through a person's emotional preoccupation. And I said, okay, what's that? And he said, really, he said that you establish rapport with that person by understanding something that they're interested in. And when you do that, if you think about it, most people are thinking about what they're going to say in response to what someone else is saying, rather than really listening. He said, so if you really can establish rapport with them right up front, you can communicate. And I've tried to practice that over the years. And that's helped me immensely in creating deep relationships with people all across the state and across the country. I believe it's important to put cookies back in the cookie jar. My daddy always said, you know, if you empty the cookie jar and you don't bake any more cookies to put in it, you're really not a classy guy at all. I mean, you've left everybody out in the rain. And it's just a family thing. I think from the get-go, always believe you're supposed to give something back. It gives me great pleasure to do that. It truly does. I think it's probably the most rewarding thing I do when I give something back. I love to work with hand tools, you know, ancient old hand tools, restore those. My wife had some health issues, and I made a cane for her out of pecan. And the other day I had made a bunch of those. And my daughter's a speech therapist, and she had a patient in one of the nursing homes she was dealing with. She said, Dad, could I take one of your canes to this lady? And I said, sure. And so I've got on my iPhone a picture of this lady walking with a cane for the first time. She hadn't walked in years. That's big stuff. That's good stuff. That's what life really counts about. That came from Henry Cloud, who wrote a book called Integrity. And that book is probably number 1 or 2 on my list. That book changed my life as a leader. It did, because when you think in terms of that, it completely changes your perspective of your relationship with the people you work with. When he said, what's it like to be on the other side of you? You think about that. I mean, if you really give that some thought, I actually asked my people, I had the courage to ask them, what's it like to be on the other side of me? I really want the truth. Because if you're a great leader, you want to know the truth. You don't want people to shoot you a line that's not accurate. You really want to know, what's the deal here? What's the real deal? Am I on target? Am I helping you get something done, or am I not? If you can think in terms of your wake as you pass through an organization, through people's lives, and you can play that movie forward, it will impact your decisions. It will, and for the better. For the better. I truly believe that. I think people's, what's the word I'm looking for? Their poser factor is on high alert. Just look at our country. Look at all the posers in leadership positions in our country. They're sending all kinds of messages that are not real. People detect that. I mean, little kids can tell a poser in a heartbeat. The ability to live and lead from your heart, who you really are, is critical, because people if they see a fake, they will not follow you. They just will not. They will distrust you. You've got to have that trust involved, and if you're not, the best way I can just illustrate that is, have you ever seen the movie Bagger Vance? I love that movie because movies tell stories, and I think that movie tells a story of, when he talks about his authentic swing, if you're a leader, you have an authentic swing as a leader too. And if you can find that authentic swing, people will follow you, and your results will be greatly enhanced. If you're trying to do somebody else's swing, you're not going to get there. You're just not going to get the results you're expecting. To me, the key to competition is strategy. Outthinking the other guy. Letting your headlights shine out farther than theirs does. That means I'm a student of everything around me. I'm constantly reading, observing, listening, picking up things that people really gloss over and don't think about. I love strategy. I mean, I wake up thinking about that stuff. I do. I'll get up in the morning, I'll go in my semi-irregular journal, and I'll take notes. And many of the creative things we've done at the center come from my 3 o'clock morning sessions, writing in that journal. It's strategy. It's thinking through, trying to see how far out we can really go. I've got about 6 of these. I've filled them. Over the years, I've been doing this for years. Yeah, early in the morning, I'll write where I am, what I'm thinking, things I learned, something that's difficult that I've dealt with. As much as anything, it's a legacy for my daughter. She'll read this someday and say, this is really the heart of my dad. I know what he's made of. I really think that that's in terms of empathy, the ability to read people, feel what they're feeling. I'll give you some good examples. The first question I ask anyone that I'm interviewing is, what are you passionate about? What are your motivated abilities? Because if I can, I'm going to put you in a position where you're using those talents and skill sets. I can remember Nancy McQuiston, who worked for us. We were thinking, she was already on staff when I became the director, but I asked her one day that question, and she said, I love turning a lump of coal into a diamond, meaning she'd take other people's writing and she would edit it and make it really good. Well, we'd been thinking about making her write something originally. She said, I would hate that. Being able to read that and adjust my management style, my leadership style to people, it's even like my children. Both of my daughters were totally different. My youngest daughter, my wife said, came into the world smoking cigars and wearing combat boots. My oldest daughter, I could look at her sternly and she would cower in complete compliance. Well, I've got staff members the same way. I've got those that I've got to go, nudge a little bit. And it's really not a nudge, it's really saying, hey, why don't you follow me here? Why don't you, here's how I see your place in the mission of the center. What do you see? And develop that rapport with them. That's what leadership is. It's getting to know your people so you can bring out the best in them. Again, the center is an applied research unit. We don't do, well, we do. Occasionally we do a little bit of basic research, but basically our mission says it all. We're helping Texans, including public policymakers, make better decisions. So if you're going to do that, you've got to connect with those people and understand what's going on. So those business relationships with the Urban Land Institute, with the Dallas Federal Reserve Bank, with the Home Builders Association, they have borne so much fruit for our center. I'll give the best example. ULI is tremendous. I've known the ULI from my days with Friendswood, heavily involved with John Turner and all the leadership there. So ULI was just a natural for me. I mean, and we put together some great programs. So I brought, Susan Combs, the comptroller, became a dear friend of mine, and brought her to the ULI meeting, and I was able to capitalize on some of my relationships to help the ULI get great speakers and great programs together. But even more, it did so much for me to be with those leaders. But when we brought in the home builders in 2010 to our office, their leadership, they paid probably the highest compliment I've ever had paid to me at the center. And they said that our data and our information kept the home building industry, because the Great Recession was driven largely by a blow up in home prices and home sales. Our information kept them from overbuilding, and therefore the recession in the state of Texas was not as deep as it was in other states. I'll take that to my grave as one of the greatest legacies of the center and of my life, really, when you think about it. So those relationships bear huge fruit. They do. I wrote something down, and I have my own core values that I wrote down, and I'm gonna read it because it's really important to me. Actually, I wrote 26, believe it or not. I've thought about this a lot, and one of those is the fact that, I said, I know I'll never arrive. Life is a journey, and I'll always be on my way until I draw my last breath. I'll always have something yet to do. I'm either growing and getting better or stagnating and dying. I choose to grow by knowing my purpose, growing to my maximum potential every day, and sowing seeds to help others along the way. I think that's a well-lived life. If I do that, I've had a well-lived life. That's my legacy. Don't go chase money. Don't chase money. Don't do it. Don't get caught in that trap. Like I say, Gil Bailey said in a quote that I saw at a camp that I went with a bunch of guys, he said, don't do what the world needs. Go do what makes you come alive, because that's what the world really needs, is people who've come alive. If they really do that, they'll make plenty of money. They'll have a happy life. They'll do amazing things. They'll make everybody look silly by the fact that they're doing what's really in their heart.